Buenos dias, Restore Church. How are we doing today? Buenos dias. As Pastor Adam said, yes, I am fresh off the plane, so to speak. So please forgive me if I forget what language I'm speaking in. I'm still dealing with a bit of jet lag. Así que me disculpáis un poquito, ¿verdad? Si hablo un poquito en español o en inglés, como quiere. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you guys. Hey, well, here's a picture of my beautiful family. My wife, Abigail, and our 3 children. Valor, he is 7 years old. Aurora, soon to be 5. And Astrid, who is 2. She was born in Spain. And yes, we are missionaries to the beautiful country of Spain. Previously to that, we served 10 years in Chi Alpha ministry most of that time at the University of Virginia. The past 3.5 years, we have been serving with the awesome team in the city of Granada, Spain. It is located in the southern portion of Spain, Andalusia, if you've ever heard of it. This is what it looks like. My house is that little castle you see there. I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's what it looks like on a beautiful sunny day, which is most of the year. And we are getting ready to move back to the States for a season of support raising for the next place that the Lord is taking us in Spain. It is a city called Vigo, Spain. An easy way you can remember that is Rigo, my amigo, in Vigo. Boom. There you go. It is a city in northern Spain, right above Portugal. And our hope and dream is that we can get there by summer of 2027. So I have a question I'd like to begin with, and it is about Spain. What do you think about when you think about Spain? And I have a little video here. Perhaps images of beautiful landscapes come to mind. Places like olive and grape vineyards in the south, breathtaking coastlines in the north, like in Galicia, where Vigo is, Mediterranean beaches in the south, or arid, dry lands where time seems to slow down and stop for a bit. Perhaps you think about medieval castles, ancient churches, and palaces that function as museums and tourist attractions for many locals and internationals. Or perhaps you think about stylish people, men and women in touch with the fashion, the arts, and culture, a society on the cutting edge of all the latest trends. However, what may be difficult for us as Christian Americans to understand are the depths of spiritual lostness in Spain. And for us to understand better, we need to take a closer look at what is going on. A place where the seed of the gospel was once planted and thrived has now become a desert wasteland. And churches that centuries ago were full of life are now monuments to a bygone era, museums for tourists, office spaces for companies, any other functional use for society. And speaking of people, these people who seem in touch with trends and seemingly lacking for nothing are living a life of spiritual poverty, seeking for answers in many things that can't truly satisfy. So we ask, who will tell them about Christ? I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine that you're walking down a crowded street in Spain. You see many people walk past you, families, individuals, young and old. The reality in Spain is that most of the people you walk past on any given street, on any given day, have never heard the gospel proclaimed. And every church they pass by on that walk is either empty or a museum, a cold, dark, unwelcoming place. And when you encounter the apathetic soil within the hearts of the people to where the seeds of the gospel are brought, then perhaps you've begun to understand the depths of spiritual lostness. So the question we invite you to ask with us is, what can possibly be done in a place where spiritual lostness and spiritual needs aren't as clearly visible as poverty, hunger, illness, or other societal dysfunctions? What can possibly be done? I'd like to propose an answer to this question. Lose yourself. Today, I'm here to highlight the need of some of the least reached people in Europe, particularly Spanish people. And I'd like to do that by sharing a message fresh off the field that I'm kind of calling the 3 lost lessons of the mission field. And my hope is to present you with three aspects of our lives that we must lose ourselves to for the sake of the gospel as it pertains to missions in Europe and our own lives in whatever context we may be. So I want to just extrapolate a little bit from Mark 8:35. It's just a short little excerpt from a discourse that Jesus is having with his disciples. And he says something really profound in this verse. He says the following: "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it." The Gospel of Mark is unique out of all the Gospels in that it says that we are to lose ourselves for Jesus and the gospel. Not only are we to commit ourselves to Jesus, but also to the mission. And in these simple words, we observe one of the most fundamental axioms of the Christian life. It is this, that the way to win is to lose oneself and the gospel, for the sake of the gospel. And what a thrilling hope it is that we have. So the first thing I want to encourage you with is the following: lose your assumptions. It's time to let go of your assumptions about how our lives should be and truly embrace the story that God is writing in and through us. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. From early on, my life revolved around the pursuit of the American dream. My family and I emigrated from the country of Honduras to the U.S., seeking better opportunities than we had. So I grew up in two worlds most of my life, speaking Spanish at home, speaking English in schools and with my friends. And I realized that I had an academic potential, so I applied myself in school and sought university as my ticket to attaining the American dream. That dream, that elusive dream that my family had given up so much for. And so I made it to college on a full ride, ready to embrace the university life. And in the midst of discerning who I was going to be, I encountered a group of people that went to something called Chi Alpha, a Christian campus organization for students. And I learned something life-changing through Christians at LSU and Chi Alpha, that happiness was not only predicated on achieving the American dream. See, I arrived to campus with all my dreams, all my hopes, along with the unfulfilled expectations of my parents and what they left behind. But I found so much more than I could have imagined. In Chi Alpha, I found a community. My life was changed and transformed by men and women who loved me, who discipled me, who challenged my superficial vision of my Christian life. And it was through their love and example that I learned to live differently. I learned to embrace the scriptures in daily reading. I learned to pray. I learned how to live out my Christian faith practically in a secular campus. And I found a purpose to live for. As God transformed me from within, he began doing his work through me. Even in my half-witted, lazy, and sometimes lackluster attempts, to be honest, he moved mightily. And I discovered a new excitement, a new adventure to live for. And then that adventure, to make him known. Because I realized that God had a dream for my life that I had never dreamed, that I had never considered. And when I beheld it, I realized how fulfilling it would be following Jesus one step at a time. One time I was scrolling through social media and I came across this quote from an American author, Florence King. She writes the following: that people are so busy dreaming the American dream, fantasizing about what they could be or have the right to be, that they fall asleep at the switch. And I don't think she was writing from a Christian perspective, but I think it epitomizes my experience and that of many others I've met. I'd been so disillusioned with the Christian life that I thought the American dream was the answer to my unfulfilled expectations and desires in my heart. I thought that if I had a certain perceived economic stability, a nice house, a nice car, 2.5 kids, and other titles affixed to my name, that I would be happy. And now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing evil about wanting stability or a good future for your kids. But the problem is that when we let these desires define our security and our purpose. In other words, when we let these desires define our identities, we come to idolize them. And so maybe we should ask ourselves, what is the good life? I live in a country where most young people don't pursue their dreams. They work tirelessly to fit the mold of a system of expectations and demands in order to land a secure job as a civil servant, like a teacher, a hospital worker, or a police officer. They want a guaranteed salary, they want a guaranteed vacation, and a guaranteed pension. And the journey to attain the Spanish dream is wrought with angst and challenges, years of studying at university for degrees, fighting to gain any type of experience anyone's willing to give you, then state exams, and then you hope to get a score high enough to make you competitive. Many don't make it. So there's a generation of young people in Spain on a path towards a dream that looks more like a nightmare. And then there's the other side. The parents at my kids' school who have reached and attained the American dream, the Spanish dream, it's not enough. They're still tired, they're bored, even with the house and the kid and the car and the beach house and whatever else. Some even realize they want to earn more, so they study more for another series of exams, and the cycle goes on and on and on, seeking a validation that they can never find. And so I often ask them, what is the good life to you then? What are we really chasing after? You see, when we give up our lives in exchange for what God offers, no, we can't always see clearly what is coming or what he has planned. But we can trust God because God is good. And he has revealed himself to be as such through his word. Do you know that God has a dream for your life? Have you ever stopped and considered what dreams God might have for you? Or have you been too busy chasing another dream? Friends, it's time to let go of our assumptions about how our lives should be and truly embrace a story that God is writing in and through us. You might be surprised, like I was, especially when I felt Jesus calling me to be a global worker. You know why? I'd never seen many Latin Americans be global workers. You want to know what else? You want to know how hard it is to tell your immigrant mom you're not going to use your degree and start asking people for money to go traveling? Yeah, try that phone call, God. Look, if you're calling me to be a missionary, you better call her first and tell her that you're calling me, because I don't want to deal with that. But it was all good. The Lord has provided, and 16 years later, there hasn't been a month where I haven't had what I needed. And that has been a testimony to my immigrant parents that God has indeed called me to the nations, and that he is sending me, and he will take care of me, and that his plan is good. Friends, let go of our assumptions. Let go of your assumptions of what your lives should be. The second thing I want to tell you is to lose your expectations. In Spain, you have to lose your expectations for privacy at the pharmacy. For some reason, they decided it was a good idea to keep the stomach medication behind the counter. And so it can get really awkward really quickly when you go up looking for stomach medicine. What do you need, sir? Stomach medicine. What are your symptoms? How do I say this? Who's around? And then everyone's listening and waiting because they're waiting for their turn in line. And then they sometimes ask really awkward questions. The pharmacists are like, is there blood involved? You're like, what, is there blood involved? What are you talking about? I just need some Pepto-Bismol. And the lady behind you is asking, is there blood involved, sir? Like, are you? There's no privacy. But there's good health care and good medication, and we usually find what we need. Lose your expectations for arriving on time in Spain because it's a very communal culture. And anytime you walk out in the street on your way to an appointment or an errand, you can almost certainly guarantee that you're going to run into somebody you know, have a conversation, and talk about life and whatever, and arrive at your destinations 15 to 20 minutes late. So sometimes I actually go through little street alleys and corners where I know I'm not going to run into anybody if I'm in a hurry. I have a picture I want to show you guys. This is a picture of when our family arrived in Spain. You can see our 2 kids. We just had 2. And in the back, yes, that is an animal in that cage. That is my dog. I have an MD, if you didn't know, a missionary dog. Very smart missionary dog. He is part of our family, so he came. He is embedded in Spain. Barks in Spanish now. So we arrived with 2 kids and a dog and 15 pieces of luggage, and we were jet lagged but excited we were there. We were ready to take on the world, or Spain specifically. And within the first week of getting there, my kids got really sick with fevers and colds, and we had to get acquainted with urgent care in our city. And in the middle of my kids being sick and dealing with fevers, I still had to go out and find a place to live because I was homeless in the city in Europe. Nobody wanted to rent out an apartment to us. They didn't understand our paperwork. They didn't understand where we got our money from. They didn't just give me the buddy discount, or they didn't treat me any better because they saw documents that said AGWM, World Missionary, on it. We finally found a place that had been unoccupied for probably more than a year. It didn't have any utilities, no water, no energy, no gas. It was kind of dirty. No appliances either. We had to furnish everything in this apartment. And in the middle of all this transition, my daughter's sleep patterns went bloop out the window. And so she's crying throughout the night as we're trying to settle into this apartment. And my first week in this place, my first ever visitor came at around 3 in the morning. It wasn't my neighbor. It wasn't the community president of the building. It was the police. Sir, your neighbors are complaining about your child crying throughout the night. I was far from family, from friends, from anything I knew as home. No one cared about why I was there, and it seemed like no one noticed. And it was in the midst of this difficult transition where I was tempted to wonder, Lord, what am I doing to my family? So in the middle of this, that a church in Havre de Grace, or however you say it, in Maryland, sent over a gift to a missionary family struggling to adjust and adapt in Spain. Thank you for that. Pastor Adam, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for believing in us and the timeliness of that gift, because in that moment when we received that gift, it was as if the Lord was affirming to us that he was in fact sending us, that he was in fact with us, that there were people on the other side of the world who believed in the work of sending workers to the least reached. Thank you for that. You see, the reality about missions and serving God is that we need people who will lose their expectations of what it will look like. The kingdom of God needs people who would be willing to lose their expectations of making themselves known, quick successes, of Instagramic models of ministry where we only post highlights and successes. I don't know what Bible you read, but as I read Scripture, I also find that God advances his kingdom not just through miracles and revivals, but through trials and suffering, persecution, rearranging of plans, and yes, even martyrdom. If the mission of Christ seems hard, slow, or disappointing to you right now, can I just encourage you by saying that he is with you? He knows how hard it's been, and he's promised never to leave you. Sometimes I also think we need to let go of our expectations of what we think missions looks like. Most of us think that missions is something far away, and it kind of is. I didn't just come from down the street today. Most of us think, when we think missions, we picture the exotic faces and places of the world. We equate lostness with poverty or the extraneous. We think missions has to look like something out of a National Geographic magazine. And don't get me wrong, yeah, sometimes missions will take us to these places, yet these things have little to do with gospel access. And it is our assumptions about missions and gospel access that keep us from seeing the tremendous need for peoples of Europe to come to know Jesus. Spain and the rest of Europe is filled with people without a church willing to take up its apostolic obligation to evangelize and make disciples. It's filled with people who in their lifetime will never have a family member, a schoolmate, a coworker, a neighbor who is a born-again Christian, let alone someone in their life who could share the gospel with them. They don't know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who can tell them the gospel. Will we respond to exotic photos or gospel realities? The city of Vigo, Spain. Out of a population of about 3.5 million people, they are their own ethnic group. They actually have a language they speak there. 0.3% of this Spanish population has a personal relationship with Jesus. The most well-known churches are in function museums and monuments to long-dead kings, yet Jesus, the true king, goes without being worshipped. And sometimes we can't see past the cathedrals in Europe to see him as more than just a vacation spot, but a missions destination. We need to plant more communities of faith among university students. We need to plant communities of faith in the villages, in towns, in the cities more than ever. We must shake off our way of seeing missions to truly embrace the adventure that God has for us in the least reached of places like Vigo, Spain. And so the last thing I want to tell you is lose yourself in adventure. Our passage tonight is sandwiched in the context of adventure. It is in the midst of miracles and traveling from cities to cities that Jesus invites his disciples to complete abandonment in Mark 8. Yet before that, he asks them a simple question. In verse 27 through 28, he says, "Who do people say I am?" He asks his disciples at one point, and they reply, "Well, some people are tweeting that you're John the Baptist. Others are saying that you're Elijah. Others say that you're just one of the prophets." But then he says, "What about you? Who do you say I am?" And Peter responds, "You're the Messiah, the promised deliverer of God's people. That is who you are, Jesus." You see, in this moment, Jesus, he's being intentional with his question. It wasn't a matter of self-promotion, but a matter of helping the disciples understand the importance of knowing who he is. And in that moment, Peter declares the truth of who Jesus is to him and to the world. And this is why it's important for us to also understand who Jesus is. This is why it's so important for me to understand who Jesus is. Because when you live and work in a secular gospel desert like Spain, where people aren't interested in hearing about Jesus, when the very attempt at the God conversation is considered at best irrelevant or at worst bigoted and foolish, when you as an American are not considered anything special, desirable, or unique in a European context, what will you hold on to? No one cares. No one wants to talk about spiritual thing. And missionary work among secular peoples is the slow, difficult work of planting seed in hard ground. We must lose our expectations of quick success. What will you hold on to when missional living gets tough? I want to share a story of losing yourself in adventure. Last summer, losing ourselves in adventure, for my wife and I meant that we were going to be the only people available in our team to run a university ministry, a family ministry, a church plant, buy groceries for ourselves, send our kids to school, pay our bills on time, everything. Our team members had to find themselves leaving the field for a season. We had some other staff transitions, and we were just alone. We were just there, just carrying on the work. And for some reason, God decided in his infinite wisdom that it was time to grow the church. So more people started coming to church. And I'm having to do the worship, I'm having to do the preaching, I'm having to do the snacks, I'm having to do the greeting, I'm having to do the cleanup, I'm having to order more chairs because we didn't have enough chairs, we didn't have enough snacks, I didn't have enough breath to keep talking to everybody. They kept coming. And for a period of about 6 months, we had one new person at our church every day. And our church isn't that big. Don't be too impressed, okay? But 40, 50 people feel really big in our space. Inner city spaces in Europe are quite small. The Lord also started bringing some curious students to our university ministry. And I had the blessing of giving a Bible for the first time ever to a young Spanish man who had questions about Jesus and had been meaning to read the Bible. And I started a relationship with him where we start talking about Jesus and the Bible and all that. I actually just met with him right before coming. And I thought, what would have happened if we hadn't said yes to the call? What would have happened to this young man if these doors weren't open? Where would he have gone to ask his questions about Jesus, the Bible, and Christianity? Where else would he have gone in this city, in this context, to ask these questions? And it made those struggles of those early days seem like a drop in the bucket. Yes, the adventure costs us. It is costly to say yes to Jesus. It's costly to give up a life in the United States with all the privileges and things I'm entitled to go be a nobody in Spain. To have to wait in line at the immigration office to get my residency card just so I can travel to the States and be able to go back into the country and see my family. It's hard to go to the pharmacy and realize after you lose all privacy and you tell them everything that's bleeding and bothering and scratchy and itchy with you that you need a prescription to buy that. It's costly when nobody wants to rent to you, even though you have finances and you're a responsible person. It's costly. But Jesus gives us himself in return. He sustains us through all of it, through every season. And friends, as we sang today, he is worthy. He is worthy. So I turn Jesus' question back to you. Who do you say he is? Is he truly everything to you? Is he worthy to you? And are you willing to embrace the adventure that Jesus has for your life? Life in Christ is definitely not what I expected it to be. It's been full of amazing surprises, miracles, hardships, and challenges. I've seen corners of the world I never thought I would ever be at, and I found community in places that were so unlikely. And one thing I never longed for anymore, my old expectations of what I thought that my life would be like. In Christ and his beautiful, wonderful, amazing mission, I found the most amazing adventure I could have ever dreamed of. I'd like to invite the worship team to come back up as we close today. Because I also believe that he's calling you on that adventure. I'd like for us to respond in 3 ways this morning, or this afternoon now that it's exactly 12:06. In Spain, this would actually still be considered morning, fun fact. 3 things, friends. Let go of your expectations of what you think your life should look like. Secondly, maybe you've been a Christian for a while, and you've held on tightly to some expectations of what serving Jesus looks like. Let go of that today. Let go of that expectation of what you think serving Jesus needs to look like. And 3, for some of you, maybe God is calling you to something bigger than you can imagine. Would you embrace that this morning? Would you embrace that adventure for your life? Can we put the picture of Vigo again, the 3%? I have two requests for you this morning. Number one, my family and I, we need prayer. I see this number, and my heart yearns for the 99% that have not heard the gospel proclaimed. And I have a dream that I'm dreaming for these people that is God's dream. And today, church family, I'm here to tell you that I can't do it alone. Will you send us? If God is touching you or leading you in any way, we would love to talk to you about how you can practically send us and support us to the field. But that's not enough, friends. I'm not just asking for you to give sacrificially. We need men and women who would be willing to go. I've raised my hand and I said, I will go, Jesus. And I'm asking you, will you come? Will you come for the 99% that haven't heard? And all it takes is them meeting a Christian, them being invited to dine with you, to a coffee, to a walk, for them to hear of the good news of Jesus, that there is a God who loves them and has a dream for their life. Will you come with us? Will you please stand today? We're going to respond in worship. Let go of your assumptions. Let go of your expectations. And lose yourself in adventure. Thank you for lending me your ears today.